When my husband tried to steal the penthouse I worked my whole life for, I didn't cry, and I didn't beg. I made sure he lost everything he tried to take from me. Stay with me till the end of this story, because it's not just about betrayal. It's about learning what real strength feels like when the person you love most turns into your biggest threat. My name is Nyla Green. I'm 33, a luxury interior designer based in Atlanta. Everything I own came from long nights, unpaid projects, and dreams I refused to give up on. My penthouse was my symbol of survival. Every inch of it told my story. From the gold-accented kitchen I designed myself to the glass balcony that looked out over the city skyline. It wasn't just a home. It was proof that I made it. Then came Cairo Benton, handsome, charming, confident. He called himself a real estate investor, always dressed in expensive suits and spoke like he knew the world. When we met at one of my open houses, he looked at me like I was the only woman in the room. Back then, I believed him. I believed every promise he made about partnership, love, and building an empire together. For a while, life felt perfect. We laughed over wine, planned trips to Italy, and made lists of future investments. But little by little, I started seeing cracks, small, sharp ones. The jokes about how I was too independent. The comments about how I didn't need him. He'd smile while saying it, but there was always something bitter behind it. Still, I tried to make it work. I thought marriage was about patience, understanding, compromise. I had no idea that behind his smiles and his business calls, Cairo was planning to take everything from me. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was looking for a contract folder in his office when I saw a thick envelope labeled property transfer. My hands trembled as I pulled out the papers. They had my name, my penthouse address, and my forged signature. It said ownership was being transferred to his company. My heart dropped so fast I could barely breathe. For a moment, I just stood there staring at the papers, the room spinning. Then anger settled in, a quiet, burning anger. He thought he could steal my life right under my nose. The man who said he loved me was trying to erase me from my own home. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I placed the papers back exactly where I found them and smiled when he walked in that evening. He had no idea that the moment I saw those documents, something inside me changed forever. That was the day I stopped being the woman he could fool and started becoming the woman he would regret betraying. 2 years ago, I was at one of my proudest moments, hosting an open house for a penthouse I had designed from scratch. Everything was perfect that day. The scent of vanilla candles, soft jazz playing in the background, and sunlight spilling across the marble floors. That was when Cairo Benton walked in. He stood out immediately, tall, confident, with a smile that could disarm anyone. He asked questions no one else asked, not about the space, but about me. By the end of the tour, he handed me his card and said, "A woman who builds beauty like this deserves the world." At that moment, I believed him. I thought he saw me for who I really was, someone who worked hard, who built herself from nothing. We started seeing each other not long after, and everything felt like a dream. Lavish dinners, spontaneous trips, expensive gifts. He made me feel like I finally had someone who wanted to share my world, not take from it. He always said, "We're going to be unstoppable together." And I believed every word. A few months later, we were married in Tulum. The wedding was beautiful, all white and gold, with ocean waves crashing behind us as we said our vows. Everyone said we looked like the perfect couple. And maybe we did. For a while, life felt effortless. He'd bring me coffee in bed, send flowers to my office, and brag about me to his friends. He was the kind of husband every woman dreamed of, until he wasn't. It started small. He'd make jokes about how I was the man of the house since I made more money. He'd laugh it off and say, "Relax, babe, I'm just kidding." But over time, the jokes started to sting. Then came the questions. Why I stayed late at work, why I needed to travel for clients, why I had so many male colleagues. The man who once admired my drive began treating it like a threat. I remember one night vividly. I came home from a long client meeting, exhausted but proud because I had just closed a massive deal. Instead of congratulating me, Cairo looked at the contract and said, "You're lucky I'm here to keep you grounded. Success gets to women's heads fast." His tone wasn't playful. It was sharp, almost resentful. He started watching my spending, claiming it was for budgeting. He'd question every dinner, every Uber receipt, even the gifts I bought for my parents. I tried to talk to him, to remind him we were partners, but somehow every conversation turned into an argument. He'd twist my words, make me feel like I was overreacting. The man who once said I deserved the world began to act like he owned it. and me along with it. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of his slow attempt to break me down, piece by piece, until he could take everything I built and call it his own. It was a Friday evening, one of those rare nights when I decided to come home early from a client meeting. The city lights were just beginning to glow as I pulled into the Penthouse parking lot, feeling proud after signing a new contract. I remember humming softly, thinking maybe I'd surprise Cairo with dinner and we could finally talk about how distant we'd been lately. But when I stepped into the Penthouse, I froze. The lights were dim, and I could hear laughter, his laughter, and a woman's voice that wasn't mine. I followed the sound to the living room, my heels silent against the marble floor. There he was, Cairo, leaning back on the couch, his hand resting on the thigh of a woman I'd never seen before. She was beautiful, perfectly styled, the kind of woman he always said he didn't notice. When she turned and saw me, her smile vanished, but Cairo didn't even flinch. He looked right at me, calm as ever, like I was the one interrupting something ordinary. "Wow," I said quietly, my voice trembling but steady enough to cut through the air. "So this is how business meetings go now." The woman, Raina Douglas, as I would later learn, tried to gather her things, mumbling something about leaving. But Cairo stopped her. "Don't," he said, like he was in control of everything, even this. Then he looked at me and said, "You pushed me away, Nyla. You've been so focused on your work, on your independence. What did you expect?" That moment broke something inside me. Not because he cheated, because he didn't even care. There was no guilt, no shame, just arrogance. I remember laughing, a cold, painful sound, before I said, "You can keep your excuses, Cairo, but you can't keep your keys." I threw him out that night. He begged for a moment, tried to spin words like, "We can fix this," and it was a mistake. But I didn't let him finish. I told him to pack his things and leave. Watching him walk out with that same smug look on his face, I felt both heartbroken and free. But the peace didn't last. For weeks after that night, Cairo bombarded me with messages, flowers, long emails, late-night calls. He said he couldn't live without me, that Raina meant nothing, that he wanted to start over. Every delivery came with a note full of guilt-tripping words about love and second chances. I ignored him at first. I tried to be strong. But loneliness can make even the smartest woman weak. Against my better judgment, I let him come back, but only to the guest room. I told myself it was temporary, that we'd just figure things out. Deep down, though, I knew I was lying to myself. I saw the danger in his eyes, even when he smiled. I just didn't know that letting him back in was the same as inviting the storm back into my home. After Cairo moved into the guest room, the air in the penthouse was heavy with silence. We barely spoke unless it was about something practical, bills, schedules, groceries. He acted gentle, quiet, almost humble, as if he understood the damage he caused and was trying to make things right. Some nights, I caught myself believing him again. He'd make breakfast, leave encouraging notes, and say things like, "I just want to help you breathe again, Nyla. You've been carrying too much alone." I wanted to believe him. I was tired, emotionally drained, physically exhausted from holding up my business and pretending I was fine. So when he offered to help with my property paperwork, I didn't argue. He said he could handle the small stuff, just managing invoices and organizing contracts for a few deals I was closing. It sounded harmless, even helpful. I told myself maybe this was a step toward healing. Days turned into weeks. He became strangely attentive, always asking for access to certain files or needing me to sign quick documents for processing. I didn't pay much attention. I trusted my own husband. Well, what was left of that trust? I thought maybe he truly wanted to rebuild. But what I didn't know was that behind his quiet charm, he was building a trap. Cairo started forging my signature on legal papers, transferring the penthouse, my penthouse, into one of his shell companies, an LLC under his name. Every moment I thought we were rebuilding was actually him tightening the noose. I remember the morning everything fell apart. I was having coffee when my banker called. His tone was polite but uneasy. "Mrs. Green," he said, "I just wanted to confirm. Did you authorize the ownership change for your residence?" My stomach dropped. I asked him to repeat himself, thinking I misheard. But he said it again slowly. "The ownership of your penthouse has been transferred to Benton Holdings LLC. The documents were filed 2 days ago." For a full minute, I couldn't speak. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would stop. I told him there had to be a mistake, that I never signed anything like that. He hesitated before replying, "Well, we have your signature on file." When the call ended, I sat frozen at the kitchen counter, staring at nothing. Every piece of kindness, every apology, every breakfast he made, it all made sense now. He hadn't changed. He was only pretending long enough to finish what he started. I walked straight into his office, my hands shaking as I tore through his drawers. There they were, the forged documents, the fake transfer forms, everything neatly stacked as if he was proud of it. My name, my signature, my home. All stolen with the stroke of a pen. That was the moment my love finally died. Whatever pieces of it remained, I buried right there beside his lies. He thought he played me, but what he didn't know was that this time, I wasn't going to cry. I was going to burn everything he built, starting with him. I waited until he came into the kitchen, fixing his shirt like nothing had changed. The morning light was thin through the windows, and the apartment smelled faintly of coffee. I held the papers in my hand, the edges soft from shaking them all night. When he turned and saw me, his face went from casual to curious. "Everything okay?" he asked, smiling as if we were still at ease. I did not answer. I set the documents on the counter and pushed them toward him. The papers slid like the truth, clean and undeniable. His smile flickered, then hardened, but he did not reach for them. "What is this?" he said, feigning ignorance. Up close, his charm looked smaller, a mask stretched thin over something ugly. My voice stayed low. "These are the transfer documents. You filed them. You put my name on a company and moved my home." He shrugged. "You wouldn't have all this if it weren't for me," he said, smooth. "I'm just taking my share." He sounded like a man who believed he had a right to plunder. For a moment, anger wanted to explode from me. I wanted to scream, to scatter the papers across the floor. Instead, I felt a clear, hard focus. I looked at him until his eyes shifted away. "Fine," I said quietly, measured like a plan. "Take what you want." He blinked, surprised by my calm. He had expected a fight, tears, a dramatic scene. He wanted proof he had won. I gave him that moment. He collected the papers with a satisfied smile, folding them like a prize. He kissed my cheek in a way that felt like theft, then returned to his phone, already composing messages to act wounded and triumphant. As he left the kitchen, the door clicked shut and the silence returned. Alone, the shock found me. The ache in my chest rose, but it was steady, not wild. I pulled out my phone and opened the notes I had kept in secret. Every suspicious bank transfer, every oddly labeled invoice, every lie I had followed like a trail. I started making a list. People to call, records to find, questions to ask. The anger inside me turned into work. He wanted victory. Let him have it. That belief would be his mistake. While he counted spoils and rehearsed his future, I would unravel what he had built. I would find the law, the loopholes, the witnesses, the paper trail that proved the forgery. He showed me how to survive him. I learned how to use his own methods against him. I folded the remaining documents into a file and slid them into the drawer where no one usually looked. Then I breathed slow and steady and let planning take over. The breaking point was not a roar. It was the exact moment I chose to stop pleading and begin to act. He thought I was broken. He had no idea I was just beginning to fight. I called Deshawn Pierce the next morning before the city had fully woken. Deshawn and I had known each other since college, smart, sharp, and the kind of lawyer who didn't scare easy. He answered on the second ring, and when I said his name, he was quiet for a beat. "What's up?" he asked. I told him one sentence. Cairo forged my name and moved my penthouse to his company. The silence on the line told me he believed me before I even finished. He came by that afternoon with a leather briefcase and a focused look. We sat at my kitchen table with coffee cooling between us. I handed him the copies of the documents I'd found and the notes I'd kept. Dates, odd invoices, emails that didn't add up. Deshawn read everything fast, his jaw tense. When he looked up, he said, "This is messy, but it's something. You did the right thing saving these." Hearing that from him felt like more than a legal opinion. It felt like a first small victory. Deshawn started digging in ways I couldn't. He ran company checks, pulled public filings, and flagged patterns I missed. One name kept showing up, Benton Holdings, LLC, registered to an address that at first looked legit. But Deshawn traced payments and found they bounced through odd accounts. Shell companies with no real business, just routing numbers and fake invoices. Each name was a ghost. Each account had a trail that led to unpaid debts and creditors masked by paperwork. We found fake invoices made out to clients I had never worked for and transfers labeled as consulting fees that disappeared into these shells. Worse, there were liens against properties Cairo claimed as investments. Debts hidden behind corporate names that would implode once creditors moved in. Every piece of dirt we uncovered painted the same picture. Cairo had been building a fake empire on borrowed credit and forged trust. I started documenting everything myself, the way Deshawn advised. I made clear folders, scans, timestamps, recorded calls where allowed, and sworn statements from people who had seen strange behavior. I sat up late nights typing lists. Vendors who never got paid, invoices that matched transactions in his accounts, emails where he asked someone to handle the paper, without naming specifics. Every note tightened the case like a noose. I also changed the way I acted at home. My smiles at Cairo turned careful, measured. When he walked in from a meeting and tried his old charm, I gave him short, polite answers and kept my phone in my hand as if I were waiting for a call. Each compliment from him I returned with an even quieter question. Where did this payment come from? Who's the investor you mentioned? What's Benton Holdings doing this quarter? He started to stumble over his words sometimes, and I kept that detail for the files. Deshawn warned me patience mattered. He told me to let Cairo be himself, confident, careless, loud, while we prepared. So I let him think he had me. I let him believe I was still the woman he could manipulate. Behind that facade, though, I was building a truth so sharp that when it landed, it would cut everything he had tried to hide. I decided the best way to make him believe I was back under his spell was to act like it. So one evening, I told Cairo I wanted to host a private dinner. Just a few close friends, something small to celebrate rebuilding trust. I said the words gently, pretending to mean them. His eyes lit up with that familiar arrogance. He thought the storm had passed, that I was crawling back into his control. That was exactly what I wanted him to think. I spent the next 2 days preparing, making sure every detail felt natural. The table was set perfectly, the wine was expensive, and the atmosphere looked effortless. I even wore the red dress he once said made me look like power in heels. He took the bait instantly. When the doorbell rang, Cairo opened it with his fake charm and welcomed his guest, Victor Langston, one of his biggest investors. I had chosen him carefully. I'd overheard Cairo mention that Victor had recently started asking questions about missing funds. That was my opening. Dinner began smoothly. Cairo laughed too loudly, bragging about upcoming property deals and international partnerships. I played along, pouring drinks, smiling, asking just the right questions to make it all seem believable. But every so often, I would gently steer the conversation toward details Cairo couldn't keep straight. So, Cairo, I said sweetly, was that project in Dubai finalized last month or earlier this year? You mentioned different dates. He hesitated for just a second, enough for Victor to notice. He tried to smooth it over, but Victor was sharp. I saw his expression change, subtle but sure. He started pressing for numbers and updates, things I knew Cairo couldn't back up. The air at the table tightened. Cairo's smile grew stiff, his words slower. I pretended not to notice, acting like a wife trying to keep the peace, but inside, I was calm and cold. This was my stage, and he was performing exactly as planned. When the dinner finally ended, Cairo was visibly frustrated. Victor left with polite words, but a clear chill in his voice. I knew he would start digging the moment he got home, and that was the first crack in Cairo's fake empire. After cleaning up, I waited until Cairo fell asleep in the guest room he'd taken over again. His breathing was steady, peaceful, as if he hadn't noticed the walls closing in. I moved quietly down the hall to his office, my heart hammering so loud I could almost hear it echo. The room was dark except for the soft glow from his computer monitor. I plugged in the flash drive and started copying everything: emails, encrypted files, contracts. The progress bar moved painfully slow, each second stretching like a lifetime. When it finished, I removed the drive, tucked it into my pocket, and exhaled for the first time in what felt like forever. As I turned off the screen, his reflection stared back at me in the glass, calm, oblivious. He still thought I was his broken wife. But I was already becoming his reckoning. Cairo barged through the penthouse doors like a storm in human form, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "What did you do, Nyla?" he shouted, his face red with fury, veins straining along his neck. He slammed his phone onto the counter, the screen showing a flood of emails, account freezes, terminated contracts, legal notifications. His empire was crumbling. The empire he built on her name, her money, her patience. Nyla sat on the couch, serene in a silk robe, sipping coffee like she'd been expecting this performance. She didn't flinch at his volume or his accusations. She'd seen that rage before, the kind that once made her tremble. But not anymore. Now it only sounded like the desperate cries of a man losing control. You think I don't know it was you? Cairo spat. You reported my companies. My investors just pulled out. You think you can ruin me? Nyla calmly placed her cup down. I didn't ruin you, Cairo, she said evenly. You did that yourself. I just stopped cleaning up your mess. He laughed bitterly, pacing, running his hands through his hair. You ungrateful woman. I gave you everything. The life you live, the penthouse you flaunt. She cut him off with a cold smile. The penthouse you tried to steal? You forged my signature, Cairo. You forgot the world isn't as stupid as you think. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the wall clock. His breath grew shallow. He could see it in her eyes now. She wasn't bluffing. The calmness, the stillness, it wasn't fear. It was victory. You think you're smart, he sneered. You think these little games will last? I'll rebuild everything. You can't destroy me. Maybe not, Nyla said softly, standing up, her voice low but sharp enough to cut through the air. But you won't rebuild it on my name again. Not on my credit. Not on my peace. He stepped closer, trying to tower over her, but she didn't back away. Her stillness unnerved him more than her words. You really went to the feds? He asked, his tone breaking between rage and disbelief. Every document, every transaction, she said. Deshawn made sure they knew who signed what. You shouldn't have used my name on your dirty loans. His phone buzzed again. Another alert, his last active account frozen. He turned pale. The reality was settling in now. He was finished. Nyla crossed her arms and whispered, You taught me how to survive you. I just learned faster. He stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Not the woman who once begged for peace, but the woman who built her own justice. Cairo stumbled back, his confidence collapsing as fast as his fortune. Nyla didn't watch him leave. She just turned away, letting the silence swallow the last echo of his anger. Her revenge wasn't loud. It was precise. And it was complete. The courtroom was silent except for the judge's steady voice reading the verdict. Nyla sat in the front row, back straight, eyes fixed ahead. Cairo was only a few feet away, but the distance between them now felt like another universe. His once polished suit looked crumpled, his arrogance drained away, replaced with a hollow, twitching anger. The judge's gavel hit once. Based on the evidence presented, including verified documentation of fraud and forged property transfers, full ownership of the penthouse is hereby granted to Mrs. Nyla Moreau. Mr. Cairo Moreau's access to all joint assets is frozen pending further investigation. Cairo's jaw tightened. He turned to her with a glare sharp enough to wound, but she didn't look back. Instead, Nyla stood quietly, gathered her documents, and walked out of the courtroom as murmurs filled the air behind her. It was over. Outside, sunlight spilled over the courthouse steps. For the first time in years, she breathed without that knot in her chest. Every signature he forged, every manipulation he hid behind charm, now laid bare for the world to see. She didn't have to scream to be believed. The truth screamed for her. Days later, news headlines painted Cairo as the disgraced real estate mogul who built an empire on fraud. His name appeared in every business feed, followed by words like forgery, embezzlement, and lawsuit. Investors cut ties overnight. Those who once toasted him at rooftop parties now deleted his number. The mighty had fallen, and this time there was no one left to clean up his mess. At home, Nyla stood in the middle of her penthouse. The city glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, lights flickering like tiny victories. Boxes of Cairo's things sat by the elevator, labeled Return to Sender. The silence that used to suffocate her now felt like peace. She walked through each room, touching walls that once echoed with arguments, betrayal, and tears. Fresh paint covered the memories. She'd changed everything, the furniture, the art, even the scent. What used to be their battlefield had become her sanctuary. In the living room, a team of decorators placed the final touches, soft gold accents, new lighting, a grand piano she'd always wanted but never bought because Cairo thought it was unnecessary. Now it gleamed proudly by the window, sunlight glinting off its surface like armor. As evening settled, she poured herself a glass of wine and stood on the balcony, the city humming below. She thought of how far she'd come, from the woman who once apologized for her own success to the woman who reclaimed everything she built. Behind her, the penthouse glowed with new life, not just redecorated but reborn. Every inch of it whispered the same truth. She had survived, she had outsmarted, and most of all, she had won. Soft music filled the penthouse that night, a slow jazz tune echoing gently through the open living room. The scent of vanilla candles mixed with the faint aroma of wine and laughter. Nyla's closest friends gathered around her new dining table. People who had seen her cry, fight, and finally stand again. There was no grand toast, no loud celebration. Just peace. The kind she hadn't felt in years. Deshawn raised his glass with a grin. "To fresh starts," he said, his eyes catching hers with quiet pride. Nyla smiled, the kind of smile that came from deep relief. "To surviving the storm," she replied softly. Their glasses clinked, and for a moment, everything felt perfectly still. She looked around the room, at the people who had stayed when everything else fell apart. Her friend Layla, who brought food when Nyla couldn't eat. Her assistant Mariah, who helped her rebuild her business after clients pulled away during the scandal. And Deshawn, who fought tooth and nail in court to expose every one of Cairo's lies. They didn't see her as a victim anymore. They saw her as she truly was, a woman who built her empire from the ashes. The city glowed outside the window, lights stretching endlessly across the horizon. Atlanta was alive, pulsing, moving forward, and so was she. Nyla stood quietly by the glass, her reflection merging with the skyline. She thought about the version of herself who once doubted her worth, who believed she needed love to feel secure. That woman was gone. Cairo hadn't just tried to steal her penthouse. He'd tried to steal her confidence, her independence, her voice. But every piece he tried to take only made her stronger. She remembered the look on his face in court, the disbelief when he realized the game had finally turned against him. There was no satisfaction in his downfall, only truth. Justice didn't need to be loud. Sometimes it was as quiet as signing your own name on the final divorce paper. Layla came over, handing her a small plate of cake. "You okay?" she asked gently. Nyla nodded, taking a bite. "More than okay," she said, her tone calm but firm. "I'm finally home." As the night went on, her friends' laughter filled the space, wrapping her in warmth. The penthouse, once filled with deceit, now felt like freedom. No shadows, no lies, just light and laughter bouncing off the walls she designed herself. When the evening ended, Nyla stood alone by the window again, her glass half full, her heart steady. The skyline shimmered before her, a reflection of everything she'd rebuilt. She whispered into the night, her voice strong and certain. "He tried to take my home," she said, eyes on the stars, "but all he did was remind me who built it." And in that quiet golden hour, Nyla Green finally felt what she'd fought for all along. Peace, power, and freedom that burned steady like fire in her veins. Do you think Nyla was right to take her power back and let Cairo face the mess he created? Or should she have tried to forgive him one last time? I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give it a like, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this one.